Good day, ladies and gentlemen. It's April 23rd, 2020. I'm here on a Zoom call with Jeff Wilson, CEO of Precipitate Gold. The reason Jeff and I are talking today is Precipitate put out a news release this morning. There was a follow-up to its release about 10 days ago. But essentially, this is sort of the first unveiling, if you will, of the new targets on their Ponton project in the Dominican Republic. And I thought it would be useful for Jeff to cover some of these in the video and maybe get a little bit more background and color on this. One thing I think is worth pointing out, Jeff, I said it this morning in an alert I sent to subscribers. I mean, Ponton is not a consolation prize. This is something that, for logistical reasons and workload reasons as much as anything, your guys didn't really get onto themselves until December. But my understanding was as soon as they'd done a short trip there, it went way up on their priority list. That's basically how things work?
Yeah, absolutely. So we, as we were prepping up the Pueblo Grande targets and getting that project drill ready over the course of late last year, site visit down to Pueblo Grande where we were refining targets, left the guys with a little bit of time, and they were able to, because it's only about a 30 kilometer trip from Pueblo Grande, which is now optioned to Barrick and Ponton. They went over to Ponton to do an initial sort of recon sort of visit, and came back pretty enamored with what they saw. And it was a project that, quite frankly, for obvious reasons, was a little bit of a back burner simply because we were so focused on the Pueblo Grande over the course of the last several months. But as I said, upon one quick trip to site, the guys were fairly enamored with it. And now, with the transaction with Barrick having been executed, allows the freedom for us to allocate time, human resources, and some budgets to getting in and trying to advance that to a drill stage as quick as we can.
And as viewers who don't really know the backstory here, the Pueblo Grande property has been optioned to Barrick Gold. Barrick has to spend $10 million US to get to 70%. Again, as I pointed out to subscribers, if you read the not so fine print in that deal, what Barrick actually has to do is make a discovery and take it to pre-feasibility, which in practice would probably cost, who knows, 20 or 30 million at least. Like you don't get something at pre-feasibility cheaper than that. That's simply what it costs. And they don't get anything unless they get something to pre-feasibility within the terms of the option. I know this to be the case. I don't think I'll be speaking out of school, Jeff, if I ask you the simple question. If Barrick had their druthers, would they have added Ponton to the joint venture deal?
Yeah, and I think they would have. It certainly was a topic of conversation between myself and some of the Barrick executives when we were getting towards the final stages of negotiation. They did raise the query sort of late on in the game, whether or not we could sort of add Ponton into the equation. And our view was that there was enough of an immediate nearer term target for us to pursue at Ponton that we wanted to retain that ourselves. And so we were able to sort of keep that separate from the transaction with Barrick and allow us to focus on Ponton as sort of our next near term target area.
Now, in terms of timing, like obviously it's a given. Everybody realizes the restrictions everyone's under essentially everywhere because of COVID-19, and obviously there's a limit to what you guys can actually do until those restrictions are lifted, not just in Canada, but obviously in the Dominican. But just leaving that aside for the moment, when you picked up Pueblo Grande, I mean, you were sort of refocusing exploration from what had been done in the past. You brought several tools to bear. There were 3 or 4 phases of work involved in generating this new set of drill targets there that presumably Barrick's going to hit on. And because of the way that worked, there may be a supposition among some people that your time from starting now to a theoretical drill program would be a long time, but in fact you're actually most of the way through the drill targeting program. Like, you're not expecting it to take very long for this thing basically be ready to drill.
Correct. And that's one of the things we tried to emphasize in the news release that we issued on Ponton, and laying out sort of the target area there, is that this is a fairly well defined target, albeit it isn't something we've talked at any great length about since acquiring the project. But there has been fairly extensive geochem and prior work done on this project, and really I think the difference between say 2017 and today in terms of metal prices, copper versus gold, just all kinds of different circumstances that have occurred. There were certain aspects of the Ponton project that were perhaps more attractive to previous operators in the past, and I think you've touched on this in some of your writing recently, whereby look, there was a copper affinity at a certain point in time, and so a certain zone within this project area perhaps captivated the attention of prior operators. What we see now with Coppa Hill is a fairly well defined epithermal style geochem target, and so to move this from where it is today to a drill target would be really sort of up to us in terms of just how extensive we want the preparatory work to be. But as you're well aware, I mean, there are members of my geological team who would say, look, I could explore this with the drill bit tomorrow. Give me the green light. What we'd really like to do, however, is to spend a little bit of time on the ground once the current global pandemic issues are resolved or loosened up. Be able to spend some time walking the ground, doing our own sampling, mapping. This sampling grid, this soil grid that has established this anomaly is open-ended, and so we would like to be able to close that off, perhaps do some ground magnetics to get some geophysical signatures out of this, and then I think very soon thereafter be in a position to look to get some drills turning here. Again, we've initiated our drill permit application already, and so although things are on hold because of the COVID-19 issues, we are in the queue, so to speak, with respect to that. And with respect to the ground magnetics that I'm talking about, fortunately for us, the gear that we require to execute on that is in country and there, and so we don't need to ship that or wait for it to clear customs or anything like that. So really what we're looking for here is for the current sort of global issues to resolve such that we can get back on planes and get people on the ground, and I think it would be a relatively short turnaround between that and getting the drills turning.
Okay, now you have your PowerPoint opener there. Maybe we should flip down and you can take a look at a couple more close-up slides and see what we're dealing with here.
Yeah, if you're looking at the screen here, and I'll open it up here in full. You can see here just a snapshot of where we are proximity-wise with respect to the Pueblo Grande, which is a bigger landmass there surrounding Pueblo Viejo, and Ponton a little bit to the east. What you'll also see here is these blue concessions that are land packages that have been picked up in recent months by Barrick. So again, the entire time that we've been operating in the Dominican Republic, which goes back to 2012, Barrick has not owned or applied for a single concession anywhere in the country outside of the existing Pueblo Viejo mine. There has been a renewed interest from Barrick in exploration and growth and expansion, and now we're seeing them pick up some land packages along the same trend, sort of between where we are at Ponton and the Pueblo Viejo mine. So again, I think this validates, if nothing else, the geological potential of where we're working here. And this next slide again shows a little bit of geology. Again, this is pretty cartoon-like, but the green indicates the Los Ranchos Formation, which is the volcanic rocks that host the big Pueblo Viejo mine. Those same Los Ranchos Formation rocks take up a good portion of our Pueblo Grande project, which is probably part of the reason why Barrick is interested. And again, if you look at Ponton over to the east, similarly, very much hosted within that same rock type. So you're in this same important geological formation that hosts a number of known mineral occurrences in country, and we think this is very well situated in that same Los Ranchos Formation here as well. This shows a little bit of a close-up of the project, the outline of the project. You can see there's a high power electricity line that cuts right through the middle of the project that actually goes, we believe, to source some of the power that operates the Pueblo Viejo mine. There's highway here very close to the project, and dirt roads sort of all throughout. So access is not a problem. Topography is quite benign, and you're maybe about a 45-minute drive to the capital city of Santo Domingo. So again, great access, great infrastructure in the right geology. And as you can see here from the stars on the screen, a number of known sort of previously delineated areas of interest or showings within the project.
Your your VP exploration, Mike Moore, when I talked to him a couple of days ago, he mentioned that because, you know, obviously he got his interest level multiplied after spending a day here, and he started the drill permitting process. He said you've already, you know, to coin a phrase, you got the locals signed up. There's already been a fair amount of effort involved in getting anybody who might be local to this. In terms of small farmers and stuff, everybody's kind of on side by the sounds of things.
Yes, absolutely. You know, again, that's one of the things we've learned, you know, years in the business, but also having dealt in the Dominican Republic, is we have a very good, you know, understanding of what's necessary to be able to get things done. And so that again is sort of step one, is to make sure that you've got, you know, local access so that you can get in and do the work. And again, the Dominican Republic, in comparison to other jurisdictions that, you know, I've been involved in operating in, you know, the price points to getting these access routes or land access to get in and do drilling programs at an early exploration stage like this is fairly inconsequential. You know, you've basically got, you know, farmers and ranchers in this area that aren't really looking to get rich off of having you go and drill off their property. So fairly manageable and expeditious to be able to get access. And so we've got all that stuff in place. We don't envision any problems going forward. And, you know, again, I think that's important to get done before you get partway through the process.
Okay, and you want to just throw up one of your geochem anomalies so people can see what you guys get excited about? Yeah,
so this is a closer look. Now, this is just gold, but oh, sorry, actually, this is flashing through. Great, this is a GIF that's flashing through here, a multi-element. So it'll roll through from gold, arsenic, mercury. It sort of shows the elements, but clearly you can see there are a number of anomalies here that we've sort of outlined with these dashed lines. But the most prominent and consistent with the most elevated readings is Coppa Hill, and this is where we're focusing sort of most of our attention and where we think the sort of the most immediate near-term drill target lies. And so anytime you're getting these very consistent elevated levels of mineralization in a contained area, you know, these are all pathfinder or trace elements for classic, you know, epithermal style mineralization, as you know, Eric. And so this stood out to us immediately when we went back and looked at the data. Again, this data was acquired by us in the initial deal with Everton, you know, almost 2 years ago, but was kind of a second priority because we were so focused on this ground surrounding Barrick. Once we sort of took some time and sort of plugged in this data and started to generate some maps and images and saw what you're looking at here on your screen, you know, I think even to a layman, it's pretty obvious to see here that this Coppa Hill has a pretty impressive concentration of the right kinds of minerals and really is screaming to be further tested and brought to a drill stage as quick as possible. What you also see here is, you know, that it's open specifically to the east and to the northeast. And so as part of our first phase of work, as we get back down on the ground and get boots on the ground here, will be to go in and to extend that soil geochem grid out in those directions and see if we can sort of close that off and see just how far that extends out to the north and to the east. And with that, then start to go back in and run lines of mag over top of this anomaly. And what's also interesting here is that up to the north in Coppa Hill, you can see here that there's a little bit more. Maybe it doesn't show on this image because we're highlighting the epithermal characteristics, but that northern anomaly appears to be much more of a sort of a classic gold copper porphyry style mineralization in terms of the makeup of that. So that's an area where there's been some prior drilling, some fairly interesting sniffs, I would say, in drilling that was done by Everton in 2017. You know, 20 meters of 0.5% copper kind of thing, starting at or near surface. And so not enough to really get you excited and jumping up and down, but given the proximity of this porphyry mineralization in tandem with the epithermal mineralization that we see here at Coppa Hill, starts to put together more of a typical sort of environment to where you might find meaningful epithermal mineralization.
Okay, and in terms of drilling, as you're obviously longer term shareholders or subscribers, and I know you guys bought bought out of bankruptcy, I guess. You and Goldquest bought a bunch of drills from a former operator down there, and I know there was some work required to actually get them to be usable again. There were parts that had to be brought in the country and all that kind of stuff. Where things stand with those drills right now?
So everything has essentially made its way in country or into the Dominican Republic now, which turned out to be a lot longer process than we'd anticipated, in part because of things, again, we didn't envision there being, rail blockades across Canada several months ago, as some people may recall. And so just getting stuff out of Canada and on its way to the Dominican Republic was problematic. And then most things have now arrived in the DR. Customs is all relatively shut down. Most government agencies in the DR are kind of shut down right now, but having everything in country is key. And then it's basically some bureaucracy and paperwork in getting the necessary entity in which these drills will be held, this joint entity between Goldquest and ourselves, sort of papered up. And really that just requires a rubber stamp from the government bodies once they open up again post COVID-19. And so, we're 99% of the way there. And I think in the interim, as I mentioned earlier, we've got some groundwork and some permitting issues to get through before we require actually mobilizing those rigs. So I suspect that when we're ready to drill, those drills that are there in country and ready to go will be easily accessible.
And you obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, it's something you're not going to have to do any financing in advance of this. I mean, you weren't broke when you did the deal with Barrick, but of course the deal with Barrick also included them injecting some cash into Precipitate.
Yeah, we're in a fortunate position here now where the cash balance is sitting somewhere around $2.3 million. And so that gives us, more than enough money to, move the company forward over the coming 12 months or so, or maybe beyond. And depending on, how we want to execute on the ground, lots of budget to work with there. And again, critical thing here in the things that we've been able to do getting to this point includes acquiring all of our property assets outright 100%. So, no property payments to underlying vendors, no work commitments of, well, you got to spend 200 grand here and this year and that sort of thing. Really, this is a fully discretionary treasury, and given access to our own drills, we think that our drill costs, again, these are round numbers, but, we think we can be looking at somewhere around a third of the cost of what we might have been spending to do this through the traditional sort of contract drilling route. So it's critical in that it saves us money and it'll stretch our dollars when it comes to drilling quite significantly, but it also gives us flexibility in the manner in which we execute with the drilling. Because as you know, in a typical scenario, you're sort of at the mercy of the contract driller. Hey, when are the drills available? Well, we're finishing up a job here and we'll be ready, say, in this month. Okay, great. And then you've got to get it shipped in. And then once it lands at site and it's mobilized, you're on the clock. And every minute that you're, scratching your head and thinking about what you want to do next, you're paying, the contractors for that time. And so not only will we save money on actual per meterage drill costs, but I think what's really critical here is, especially as it relates to something like Ponton and Coppa Hill, the ability to, plunk a drill up on site, poke a hole or two, and if necessary, send it off to the lab and sit and think. And not feel rushed or pressured into getting the mob to the next site as quick as possible and getting the drills done and off site before you run out of money. I think that's a real luxury to have this go around, and I think it's the manner in which we'll deploy these drills here at the Ponton project.
Okay, and just in closing, I just want to make a comment about a couple of comments. One comment is for those of you that don't know the newsletter and know my relationships way back in the day before Jeff, actually. I was one of the founders of Precipitate when it was first set up. My late brother and I were. I mean, I'm obviously not directly involved with the company, although I'm happy to, have things bounced off me. But because of that relationship, because I am a large shareholder, I don't rate the company. It's not because I don't like it; it's because I'm a little bit too close, and I'm an informal, unpaid, I might add, advisor. But one thing that's worth noting coming out of this Barrick deal, because Barrick has been added to your list of large shareholders, and you actually have a pretty significant list of large shareholders. And what sort of where I'm going here is PRG's got, I don't know, 100 million shares of, but if you were to take like the top 10 shareholders, that's got to be, I don't know what percentage it is now, but it's a pretty big one. I mean, the stock holding is actually fairly concentrated.
Yeah, I mean, I think if you were to go up to say as many as 10 top shareholders, I think you get to, again, I'm spitballing here, but I think you certainly get over 50% and close to 60% pretty quickly, maybe even on one hand.
Yeah.
And a couple of those larger shareholders have been incredibly loyal, and in some cases have been significant participants in sequential financings. And so the kinds of shareholders that not only own the stock and hold the stock, but when the next round of financing or opportunity comes along, are there to support the ongoing endeavor. So yeah, I think you make a point here that although over time this company's been around since 2012, although there's a reasonable number of shares out, in and around 100 million at present, it's fairly tightly held. And I think we see that in the market even over the last couple of days, where I think that we typically move fairly positively on good news, and in otherwise down markets, excluding this last couple of months where things have been excessively bad, but we've typically had some pretty good support and not a lot of selling pressure in some of the leaner times as well. So my view is that we've got a great strong shareholder base, and I think most of our shareholders like the way that the company has positioned itself over the last few weeks here with some of the news releases that we've put out. And we feel strongly that our objective here is to add value and give shareholders a chance at a significant upside. And I think that this Coppa Hill project coming together looks to be a real near-term target for that, and we're pretty excited to get going on it.
Okay. I mean, I think that's it's probably running long. That's probably enough for today. I mean, I wanted to thank you for coming on and walking us through the details on this. I don't want to go into it today because we're running long, and maybe if those targets come to the fore again sometime in the not too distant future, we can go back and talk about Wanda Herrera. But I'm mainly trying to point out that there's, aside from targets that have money spent on them by Barrick, Precipitate does have a lot of targets that's 100%. There's actually lots of drill targets that Jeff hasn't bothered talking about in the last year or two that are still out there and will still get hit at some point. So Precipitate Gold, it's PRG on the venture. I think it's PRIEF.
Correct.
I think on the bulletin board.
Yep.
Very interesting story. I mean, I'm probably too close for comfort, but this is a great target. I love epithermal targets. I love near surface stuff. So I definitely think this thing's worth taking a look at. Thanks for stopping by, Jeff.
Thanks for the time.
Okay.